coming here to France, where this Monday will be a big day in French politics. Prime Minister François Bayrou faces a confidence vote in the National Assembly, which he is expected to lose. French President Emmanuel Macron will then need to name a new prime minister, the third within the past year, though he could also choose to step down or dissolve parliament and call once again for new elections. Bayrou's downfall was sparked by opposition to his austerity budget, with France facing an end-of-year deadline to pass a new budget for next year. For some insight into all of this, we can speak to Richard Verly, correspondent and columnist for Swiss paper Blick. Richard, good to talk to you. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Good morning.
First, what's your general feeling going into this vote tomorrow? Do you find that there's any suspense at all?
Well, if you listen to observers, if you read the media, there is no suspense at all. I mean, it's been done. François Bayrou will lose the confidence that he requested himself from the National Assembly. A majority of the deputy will vote against his government. And in the minutes to come, he will have to go to the Élysée Palace and present his resignation to President Macron. A survival of Prime Minister Bayrou government would be indeed a political miracle, but it's very, very unlikely that it will happen this way.
And so assuming that he loses this vote, what do you think is going to happen next?
Well, there are actually three possibilities. The first possibility, once François Bayrou has presented his resignation to the president, is that Emmanuel Macron decides to nominate a new prime minister. He can do so, and this new prime minister can even be François Bayrou himself, though he said several times that he will not ask to be renominated. That's the first option. Then the new prime minister will have to find a majority for his budget, because there is still a budget to come. The budget has to come in front of the National Assembly at the latest on the second Tuesday of October, or the first Tuesday of October. So that's the first option. The second option is dissolving the National Assembly. Dissolving the National Assembly would mean that President Macron gears to new legislative election that would be highly risky for him, knowing that he has 1 year and a half for his mandate to go. And there is a third option, is to choose a prime minister outside of the political field, to go for a technician, someone who has no political color, someone who can pretend to be there only to run the government, to run the country, but still the budget question will be there. But having a technician in position of prime minister may permit Emmanuel Macron to escape the difficulty of having a majority.
And so of those options, what do you think is the most likely? Is it that third one that you were just mentioning?
I think Emmanuel Macron would be certainly tempted by nominating a high civil servant or a technician as prime minister. But that's not what the political parties want. The political parties still want politicians to run the show. So it's going to be difficult for Emmanuel Macron to convince them and to make them accept the fact that they lose the grip on power. So clearly speaking, I think he will be forced to find someone in the political field from one of the political party. He has two possibilities there. Either he stick to the central right, what Mr. Bayrou was actually coming from, or he goes to the left, to the Social Democrat, letting them trying to form a government and to find either a majority or at least a no confidence pact, meaning that all the parties, all the concerned parties will accept not to vote against the new government. As you see, that is very risky. It is a razor line that President Macron is walking in at the moment.
This all started, or the most recent round of political chaos sort of started over this budget issues. Some economists say, France's budget problems, its debt problems aren't quite as bad as Bayrou's making them out to be. What's your take on how, on France's financial situation?
But if you look at France from a European point of view, well, if you take into account what happened in other countries in the European Union, Italy, Spain, Greece in the past, France has a budgetary problem. It has a serious budgetary problem. It has a debt amounting to 3,400 billion euro, which is around 170% of its GDP. It has a deficit running around 5.4%, a public deficit. So it cannot go this way. It cannot continue. The state has to save cost and save money, and that's what François Bayrou was proposing with a budget with 44 million euros of cuts. So is that figure the correct one? Should we go for something like 30 million instead of 44? There is probably a room of negotiation. It is possible, but France has to show a way. It has to show a convincing track from the European Commission. The European Commission wants France to cut its public expenses. And I think the next government will not escape the fact that it has to cut costs once again. What is the room for negotiation? The socialists believe they can go down up to 20 million rather than 44 million. I think it's probably too less. So we will end up with a figure around 30 million, and it will be very difficult to accept for a number of political parties in parliament. At the moment, the new prime minister probably can count on around 230 deputies among 577. You can see this is clearly not a majority.
Meanwhile, there's been a viral online campaign calling to shut down the country with protests on Wednesday, September 10th. It's called Bloquons tout, or Block Everything, and it's been described as sort of a Yellow Vest 2.0. What's your sense of who might participate in that movement, and do you think it's going to have big turnout?
Well, you've got two social rendezvous that the new government will have to be very careful about, but maybe President Macron will wait a bit before nominating a new prime minister. The first date is the one you mentioned this week, on Wednesday, the 10th of September, the blockade all. Mot d'ordre, slogan, has come mainly from social networks, mainly from activists, from groups who have links with the radical left. Jean-Luc Mélenchon himself, the leader of the radical left, he has endorsed this day of blockade on the 10th of September. So what we might see is initiatives that are not expected. I would not be surprised if railway stations are blocked, if highways are blocked, if some streets of Paris are blocked. That is the kind of thing that we may see. And it might bring some kind of violence, because people will get surprised, people will go to work and will certainly not accept it. And then you have a second social rendezvous, which is more organized, which is at the appeal of the trade unions. It is for the 18th of September. Then it's a strike. It's a general strike in public service. So you have a week of tensions between the 10th of September and the 18th of September. The question is there whether Emmanuel Macron will wait and will keep François Bayrou for the moment on government, running what we call the affaire courante, or will he try to replace the prime minister as soon as possible, precisely to diffuse the social tension?
All right, it's going to be an interesting couple of weeks coming up here in France. Richard Verly.
I'm sure we'll come back on air commenting on France, and the situation is not good either politically or socially.
Yeah, we're planning to speak to you quite a bit in the coming weeks. Richard Verly, thank you so much as always. That's Richard Verly, correspondent and columnist for the Swiss paper Blick.